having a will really does protect your family in that way, because you do have that option of saying, this is who I want in charge, and this is who's going to be my voice.
Hello, friend. We're glad you're here today to join us on Galcom's Mission Compass, your guide to the Great Commission. I'm Ron Harris. What does it take to be a missionary today? Well, it may take someone just like you, with the unique skills and abilities God gave you to do your part in the Great Commission. And here's your host, Galcom's Tim Whitehead, to tell you more.
Well, thank you, Ron. Hey, friends, thank you for joining us on the YouTube version of the Mission Compass. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, because you never want to miss an episode. We got great stuff for you every week, pointing you into serving in the Great Commission. That's why it's called the Mission Compass. And speaking of serving in the Great Commission, producer Brent, you're just back from Peru.
I am just back from Peru.
Had a great trip?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was really great.
I'd like to hear more about it, but we got a full program here. We don't have enough time. But really quick, what was your favorite part? Actually, you know what? No, we don't have time. Bonnie Stale is about to join us with our Reset Devotional. Stan Jeter's got a GNA news update. And Sarah Sunnucks joins us online. She's with a funeral home not too far from us here at Galcom. And she's talking about legacy planning and being a help to you, because, hey, the Bible talks all sorts of times about what your use of money says about your heart and your priorities. And so we got a program. So, Brent, write it down. We'll talk about Peru next week, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, and here comes the Mission Compass. Here's Bonnie Stale with today's Reset.
Hills and valleys. Every life experience is a combination of good and bad. I'm Bonnie Sala with Reset. A pastor had a unique way of looking at the good and bad that makes up life here on earth. He said, rather than life being hills and valleys, I believe it's kind of like two rails on a railroad track, and at all times you have something good and something bad in your life. Sometimes circumstances along the bad track overwhelm us. There are circumstances that we can't rejoice in. That pastor had experienced serious illness and death in his family. But each of us can rejoice in who God is and in his never-ending love for us. No matter where the railroad tracks of your life ever take you, you can rely on God there. Here are some facts about God from his book, the Bible. It says that long ago he laid the foundation of the earth and made the heavens with his hands. Even though they wear out like old clothing, he remains forever. He never changes. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Scripture tells that whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He does not change like shifting shadows. Sometimes life is good, but, says the pastor, no matter how good things are in your life, there is always something bad that needs to be worked on. And no matter how bad things are in your life, there is always something good you can thank God for. In happy moments, we are reminded, praise God. In difficult moments, seek God. In quiet moments, worship God. In painful moments, trust God. In every moment, thank God. I'm Bonnie Sala with Reset. To read, share, or hear this again, or to find more resources like this, visit guidelines.org.
Well, friend, as we do every month, we want to get an update on what God is doing somewhere around the world. And where do we go to get that information? Stan Jeter, GNA News. Stan, always great to have you with us.
Fantastic, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to what our stories are going to do out there and what our tips are going to do to help people tell stories of their own.
I almost forgot, of course, not only reporting, but also getting us all to be reporting what God is doing. So I don't know anyone else that's doing this on the scale you are, gathering what God is doing from all around the world. So where are you taking us this week?
Well, I'd like to take you to Mercy Ships. Mercy Ships is a ministry with hospital ships operating in Africa and different parts of the world. And we want to highlight today a Christian surgeon based in London. Now, Mercy Ships lives with volunteers. They have full-time volunteers on the ships. They have medical people. They have administrative people and people who operate the ships, But They help volunteers as well. And the volunteers come from many walks of life, and they really depend on volunteer medical people. So I want to highlight one of those people. It's London-based Christian surgeon, Dr. Leo Cheng. And he's received an honorary fellowship from Cardiff University. And we'll have a little bit of that in the story. But for over 20 years, he has taken his vacations, his annual leave, to serve on board the hospital ships Anastasis, excuse me, the Africa Mercy and Global Mercy, once or even twice a year since 2004. So inspired by his faith and 5 degrees to his name,
Wow.
Dr. Cheng uses his skills and knowledge to bring life-saving surgical care to women, men, and children across sub-Saharan Africa. In this report, he shares what really inspires him as he works with patients with cleft lips and palates and enormous tumors on throats and faces. He's doing an amazing job. Here's the story.
For the past 20 years, London-based Christian surgeon Leo Cheng has used his annual leave each year to serve as a volunteer providing life-changing facial surgery on board the medical vessels run by the charity Mercy Ships. And to honour his 2 decades of service, he recently received an honorary fellowship from Cardiff University in Wales. Dr. Cheng says he was extremely humbled to receive this award.
I don't feel I deserve it, but partly because my input to Mercy Ship, when you compare with the long-term crew members, compare with what I call Mother Teresa surgeons, those are the real selfless, godly people.
Dr. Cheng says what inspires him to keep coming back is when he sees the remarkable response of his patients when they come out of surgery and see themselves in the mirror for the first time.
The eyes pop out, mouth open, and then they have to check the mirror several times a day, several days a week, to make sure what they are seeing in the mirror are not dreaming. Because that reaction, then no money can buy. You know, that is why I did dentistry, did medicine, is to bring healing.
And Cheng, along with Mercy Ship's volunteers and crew members, remain committed to bringing hope and healing to many more patients in desperate need of help. Peter Wooding reporting for the Global News Alliance.
Fantastic, Stan. I just want to, before we get to the tip and trick, though, I want to just highlight something he said about how he honored the people that were full-time on the ship. You got engineers, you got guys working in the diesel room, diesel mechanics. He understands it takes all of us to fulfill the Great Commission. So absolutely, he's a vital part, and we'd love to see more doctors do this. But we want to honor every party. Jesus describes the church as a body, all the parts just as necessary to the others. So great to hear Dr. Cheng say that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are touching on the point that I wanted to include in the tip today.
All right, take it away.
For smartphone reporting. And just give a little bit of background about the power of working together. So for this story, we thank Mercy Ship's video producers on board. They contributed some footage of surgeries with Dr. Cheng and others. And we thank Dr. Cheng for being available for a Zoom interview for the story. And of course, our London Bureau Chief, Peter Wooding, who put it all together. It took a team to make this one short story. And the scripture reminds us in Ecclesiastes 4, 2 people are better than one, or they can help each other succeed. So let's talk about teamwork. And I want to give a little background about the Global News Alliance. We depend on teamwork to get our stories. Just like Galcom, you depend on a teamwork to manufacture and distribute solar-powered radios and other implements. So teamwork is essential. We're not Lone Rangers here. So I want to go back to what inspired us with Global News Alliance at the very beginning, the amazing teamwork with 5 newspapers in New York City back in 1846.
Wow.
They wanted better news coverage of the Mexican-American War. They weren't happy with the mailed dispatches from the front lines. And so in 1846, 5 New York City newspapers pooled their resources to fund a Pony Express route that would bring them news of the war much more quickly than the post office. What those newspapers began many years ago in New York is now the Associated Press,
Oh, wow.
the world's dominant news service.
Absolutely.
Similar story then, why we started GNA. There was no TV news service to deliver our kind of story to Christian broadcasters. Every TV channel or network had to find and produce news stories on their own, and sometimes, most of the time, that was beyond their capability. So I met with several international broadcasters at an NRB convention, the broadcasters conventions that you and I have attended, and we agreed to share our news stories with each other. That cooperation became the Global News Alliance.
There it is.
GNA grew, and today broadcasters, ministries, churches, individual reporters contribute stories to our online news feed, stories you can watch at gna.news.
Excellent. So here's the invitation, friend. Join the team. GNA.news, there's instructions on how to use your smartphone to be a contributor, to tell God's story from where you're at, and then all the information on how to do it well. I didn't know that Associated Press came out of a Pony Express special delivery.
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't there a Bible verse about don't look down on the things of small beginnings? I'm butchering that one, but
don't despise the days of small beginnings.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here, Stan. But friends, join the team. Don't despise something small that you've started. God can use you to be part of sharing his story, being part of the Great Commission. Thank you so much, Stan.
Quite welcome, Tim. Thank you.
Well, friend, you've probably heard the old missionary saying, there's 3 ways to get involved in the Great Commission. You pray, you give, or you go. And here on the Mission Compass, we talk about praying every time, and we talk about going 51 out of 52 episodes a year. But today, we want to talk about the giving part. And to help us do that is Sarah Sunnucks, a pre-planning funeral director from Smith's Funeral Home, not too far from our office here at Galcom. Sarah, thank you for giving us some of your time.
Thank you so much for asking me.
Now, just to be clear, if you go back to our website and listen to last week's episode of the Mission Compass, you'll hear Sarah's father, Rick Bradford, missionary to Nigeria, talk about all the work that they're doing there. So Sarah knows the missions. She gets it. This is our connection here through her parents, Rick and Martha, who are serving in Nigeria. But Sarah, in your role, working with people in a very delicate, emotional, kind of sensitive part of life, you've got some skills to help us plan properly our finances to further the work of Jesus Christ. So first of all, August is Make a Will Month. Tell us about the importance of having a will.
Yeah, so the way I kind of describe a will is it's your voice when you're not around anymore. So that's the purpose of kind of a will, is you get to determine what you want to happen after you're gone. And so the idea of it being your voice is actually really, really important, because anything that you want to happen can be put into a will. And so nobody has to guess, nobody has to, make assumptions or it's already laid out, it's already ready to go. But I think the most important thing to talk about is what happens if you die without a will.
That's what it's going to get at, yeah.
Yeah. Right now, statistically in Canada, about 60% of the population still does not have a will or doesn't have a valid will. So meaning that they might have made a will a while ago, but hasn't really looked into it recently to see if it's still going to work or, be something that can happen for the family. One of the reasons why a will would be invalid is if your executor passed away, right? So, you always want to be updating your will, making sure that it's valid. But that's a huge percentage of the population that doesn't have a will. And so when I talk about why you need a will, it's more important to say what will happen if you don't have a will. So there's something called next of kin law. So basically what happens when you don't have a will is next of kin law is a way that the government kind of allows us to handle A, your body or what's going to happen with you, and then B, the paperwork that happens afterwards. So next of kin law, sometimes it can be really easy. If I'm married and I pass away, my spouse is my next of kin. Super, super easy. But in 2024, what is considered a spouse? Because there's a lot of people who might have, a married spouse, but they might be separated, they might be common law. So even just the term spouse can actually be quite difficult sometimes for some people. And then the other thing is, if you don't have an automatic next of kin, meaning like your spouse, it could be your children. So for myself in particular, I have 5 kids. All 5 of them under next of kin law have a say. And so I know all 5 of them will not get along in the same way. They'll all have different ideas of what should happen or what's going to happen to even just an obituary in the newspaper or having a service at the church or there's lots of different things that people can, have little arguments about, we'll say, or little discussions about. And so without a will, that all 5 of my children would have an equal say. And so that wouldn't be the best situation. And then if one of them wanted to take over, if one of them wanted to become the estate administrator, all 4 of them would have to sign off to give permission for that one person, and it has to go through the courts. So it does become quite complicated if you die without a will. There's also things like stepchildren, they don't technically qualify as next of kin. So there's like a whole bunch of different things because of the family dynamics that are happening in our world, right? So having a will really does protect your family in that way, because you do have that option of saying, this is who I want in charge, and this is who's going to be my voice. And then that also gives you a chance to really talk to that person and say, listen, this is what I want and why. One example is we had a gentleman who works with us, and his dad passed away, and he just assumed he was the executor because he works in our industry. He does this for a living. But when he actually saw the will, it was actually his sister, and he was actually a little bit upset about that. He thought, oh man, why did my dad not trust me? Like, why didn't he make me the executor? And so just with talking with him, I said, what was happening that year your dad made the will? And it came out that he was having a hard time that year. His finances were not working and relationships, stuff like that. And so his dad probably thought, this isn't a good person to take right now, this responsibility. So I'll make the daughter the executor. But there was no actual conversation with either of them why he chose or what the situation was going to happen. So it made things complicated even with the will. So you always want to talk to your executors, about what your wishes are and why. So that's kind of my short, why you need a will.
That's really good advice. Yeah, my parents actually sat down with my sister and I and said, we just redid our will, because life has changed. Here's what you need to know. And it is kind of like, really? We're talking about you dying? But it was not that bad. After we got over that first little uncomfortable part, then it was a pretty responsible conversation, and my parents indicating, here's what we're doing for the 2 of you. And biblically, the Bible says we're supposed to take care of our children. So that should be included in the will. What do we do about the kids? How do we provide for them? I can't imagine your senior kids not getting along. I know your kids; they're great kids. I'm sure but they're minors, right? So you have to include that. And in my will, my wife and I, we had to address the fact that we have a minor still. All of our other kids are now adults, but so we have to update our will. How do we make sure our kids are taken care of? But the thing that we want to talk here on Mission Compass and about doing mission is the giving part of a will. Can you explain? I know for our friends in the U.S., this might be a little different for you. But there is a benefit to naming a ministry or a charity in your will. So talk us through a little bit about that. So first we care for family. Done. All right, we get it down on paper. We're caring for our kids, our family. But if you've been giving to a church or a charity, a ministry for your whole life, you want to leave a legacy. So explain that for us.
So kind of the same topic is why you want a will is because you don't want to leave a mess, right? And you don't want to leave your family overwhelmed with, bills or problems or things they're not aware of. And one of the biggest things I find is most people who are executors, they don't know what an executor actually does, because really you might only do it 2 or 3 times in your whole entire life. Both your parents and then your spouse. That might be it, right? And so how do you know how to be an executor? Because there is quite a lot to do. One of the things that you have to do is you have to pay, in Canada, in Ontario, we call it probate tax, but it's a state administration tax or a death tax. So that tax in Ontario can actually be avoided, but for the most part, you have to plan on paying this tax. It happens on single assets, and it's a tax the government basically takes at the end of the second spouse that passed. So in Ontario, we can, work towards paying that tax that happens right at the beginning. So if you have a house just in your name, if you have a cottage just in your name, your bank account has over $50,000, that all gets taxed by the government. So happens to be that tax. But there's a second tax that actually happens, and that's your income tax for the year that you pass away. So if you pass away and you have, let's say, an RRSP or a RIF, that money all gets pulled at the time of death if you don't have a living spouse. So all that money that's left in that RIF is pulled on that income tax year that you pass away. The other thing that you pay income tax on is if you have capital gains. So capital gains, we just heard it went up for a percentage for the government. So if you own any second property, so any property that's not your primary residence, so an idea is like a cottage or a second property like that, that once it's been sold becomes capital gains and it goes on your income tax, right? So we're talking about, it could potentially, depending on your estate, it could potentially be a huge tax to the government. So when we're talking about leaving a legacy, it actually goes hand in hand with don't leave a mess, or know what your legacy is going to look like when it comes to the end. And so putting a charity on your will, you will be giving a charity like yourselves, an amount from your estate. And it could be a percentage, it could be a dollar amount, but it actually goes on your income tax for that last death tax. And so that way you can actually take away some of that money you're giving to the government because they're not taxing you at such a high rate. So when I talk to families about this process, I'll say, either you're going to give this money to the government or you're going to give it to the charity. And what would you prefer to do? Give it to the charity, right? Like the government's going to take it anyway. So you might as well give it to the charity instead of the government. And so it's a really good way of taking your final income tax and making it less because you've given a larger portion to the charity on your last income tax. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I've heard actually some advice. So I have 5 kids that advice saying, you know what, if you're going to divide your estate 5 ways evenly to your kids, why not add a 6th child and call it charity? Is that good advice?
For sure. I mean, there's different ways you can do it. You can do a percentage of the entire estate goes to a charity, or you can do a dollar amount, saying like I want 10,000 or 20,000. Percentage is really good. It's similar to what you're talking about where, you're dividing by 5. So instead you're dividing by 6 or, that sort of thing, or 10% of the entirety. So that depending on how much bills happen at the end, you still have a portion going to charity, whatever's left over. So yeah, there's different ways of doing it. And a good estate lawyer or an accountant will help you kind of understand what kind of things will be, happening at the time of your death.
Yeah. And you threw in like RSPs and cottages. That's for a different program. That's for you and your financial planner, your lawyer. Any other advice for us real quick?
Yeah, so I have one other thing that I just learned about recently, which I wanted to bring up with you is the example of life insurance. So I have term life insurance. And what that means is if I were to pass away before I'm 71, there's an amount that goes to my family to kind of offset some of my, income that I've been bringing in over the past couple of years. Now, I've just found out recently that if you're getting up to about the 70, time frame, that term life insurance is going to end at 71. You can actually donate to a charity as well. So there's ways that you can actually donate things like life insurance that is going to expire and you're not going to get anything from it, but the charity can actually take it over and you get a charitable donation from that too. So there's a lot of ways to actually use your money in your later life that can actually benefit charities in a really successful way. But you really need to have someone who's got their, ideas kind of, and this is a new thing. I've just heard about it recently. So, but definitely as you're aging and you really want to maximize your funding and what you can do for charities, there's lots of different ways that you can use it. So definitely planning ahead and estate planning, we call it, is really important for anyone, no matter what stage of life they're in.
Friends, if you have been donating to a ministry, if you've been giving to us at Galcom, God bless you and thank you. But don't leave your last gift, your legacy gift, undecided. Make a plan. So I think that's the best advice. Make a plan, have the uncomfortable conversation. My father always told me, Tim, there's 2 inevitabilities in life, death and taxes. We have to deal with this. And so make a plan and do your best to put your treasure where your heart is. And if you've been giving to ministry, put your treasure there. Don't just leave it aside and leave a mess to your family. Sarah, can people contact you if they want some advice? Can you point them in the direction of a good lawyer or accountant?
Yes, I definitely see my role here at Smith's Funeral Home as a resource person. So I'm here for education. I'm here to just be a resource. And I kind of pride myself in trying to figure out what's happening and helping people out, especially when it comes to planning ahead. So you can contact me at the funeral home. My phone number here is 24/7 or my email. But also through Tim, if you chat with him through Galcom, he can get you my information as well. But I'm just here to help families, and the more we plan ahead, the less mess is really the plan. So.
And the
Yeah.
reason why I wanted to talk to Sarah as opposed to anybody else is because her parents are missionaries. And so she gets it. If you have a heart for sharing the gospel, and that Mission Compass is your guide to the Great Commission. We're not a financial planning program. But if you want to leave a gift to ministry, if you value that, talk to Sarah because she gets it too. So you're talking to someone that's going to understand. They're not going to go, you really want to leave this to a church? Are you crazy? So this is why we want to talk to Sarah. Can you give us at least your email? And if you don't have a pencil, you're driving, you don't have a pencil to write it down, you can get in touch with us at galcom@galcom.org. But Sarah, if they want to get in touch with you direct?
Yeah, so it's called pre-planning, so PRE planning at Smiths, SMITHS, so Smiths, FH, as in funeralhome.com.
Pre-planning at smithsfh.com. That is Sarah's email, and she will just have that first conversation, get over some of those fears, those kind of things. 60% of people don't have a will in Canada. I'm sure in the US it's similar. Make the plan, make a gift, leave a legacy for the lost so that people can hear about Jesus Christ through your death even. What a great legacy to leave. Sarah, I just want to thank you for your time again. Friends, don't be scared by this. Talk to Sarah. She'll help you work it through. Really appreciate your time.
And also, if you have nothing, you still should have a will. So talk to me anyways if you have nothing.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Well, friend, we're at the end of our program today. You've been listening to Galcom's Mission Compass, your guide to the Great Commission. We really appreciate you joining us and would like to send you a special gift. Contact us to receive your free copy of Reset with Bonnie Sala, a 20-day devotional. Visit galcom.org and click on Mission Compass. Fill in your contact info and we'll mail a gift out to you right away. If you enjoyed today's program, you can listen again at galcom.org or on your favorite streaming platform. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and to share. There are many ways to partner with us, and to find out more, visit our website at galcom.org. That's Galcom spelled GALCOM.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I'm Ron Harris. Thanks for joining us today on Mission Compass, a radio ministry of Galcom International.